Welcome to the first of what I hope is going to be several bridge tutorials. So my intent for these is to take you, the listener, who may be familiar with Visual Studio and with MS Build and with the Microsoft tools, and to show you some of the similar tools that you would have if you are planning on doing Java development. So this first bridge tutorial is just going to be some initial environment setup. In this case, the setup for getting Java SDK installed with Eclipse, as well as for a system called Maven. Okay, so Java development. First things first, you're going to need to get a Java development kit. So in this case, I'm actually going to be using JDK 7 from Oracle, just the standard edition. And so I will actually include the links as part of my when I post this. Second package that you're going to want to download is going to be Eclipse, which is going to be one of the standard IDEs that many developers use. In this case, you're going to want the Eclipse IDE for Java developers. And so one of the things you probably noticed is I'm actually using Eclipse Indigo Service Release 2. The reason for that is Juno is out, but it's still got a lot to be desired. Based off of what a lot of my colleagues have told me, that there's a lot of bug fixes that they need to release, and that you'd probably be better off sticking with Indigo until they can get a couple of service releases under their belt. The final package that we're going to go over today is going to be Maven. And so for those of you who are familiar with Visual Studio MS Build and the build system that they produce, this is one of the build systems you can use with Java. We will go into this a little bit later, but for the setup, you're going to want the Java SE download, the Eclipse, and Maven. Okay, so first things first, we're going to want to get the Java development kit up and running. And so I've already downloaded the packages. And so it's pretty much standard boilerplate install. Now, one of the things I do prefer on do myself is, rather than installing it to program files, I prefer to keep most of my development tools in a separate folder. And so in this case, I'm going to change the JDK to go to a separate software folder. This just makes it a little bit easier to manage later on, especially for updating. So as you can see, it's going through the install. JDK shows up. And then, so this package is also going to be installing a Java runtime, which it'll get to here in a minute. Okay, installing Java runtime environment. Okay, so the same thing. Prefer to keep these in. And I do have a reason for doing this that we will get here to in a minute. And so now it's going to go through the install. And unfortunately, this is going to take a few minutes. Okay, registers the environment. And let's go ahead and finish. And let's go ahead and skip that. Okay, and as you've probably already noticed, software I also have Apache Maven and Eclipse. And so in this case, both of these are just zip files that you just have to expand into a particular folder. And so these are all pretty much standalone software, no need to actually run and install. And same thing with Eclipse. Okay, so now that we have everything installed and set up in the software directory, we do have several other post-install steps that we're going to have to take care of. So first things first, let's just make sure that we sanity check our Java environment. And so you'll see this is already in our path, and then we can invoke the Java runtime. Okay, and so version 1.7. Now, unfortunately with the JDK, they don't set up any of the path information for you. And so as evidence, okay, the final thing is we're also going to want to get Apache Maven set up in our bin path as well. And so you'll notice, again, Maven, this is the command line to invoke, is not set up either. So if you go to the advanced settings in environment variables, so what we need to get set up here is going to be several system variables. So first things first, we need to get Java home set up. And so this is just basically a path that just says, where do you find your Java runtime? And so this is the reason why I prefer to put this stuff in a real easy to find folder, is so we can just type, bam, done. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to want to do is to get the path set up. And so normally what you could do, and so first things first, you can normally put in your path information, but one of the other best practices that I like to follow is, instead of doing that, create a new variable and then use that to provide the location. Reason for that is it does make it a little bit easier when you want to maintain it, because this path variable is longer as heck, and just put it in with an expansion. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing for Maven. And so we go to Apache Maven, bin, copy that, go back to path, and we're done. Okay, now I'm just going to, now in this case, if we go Java version, it should bring up version 1.7, Java compiler, version 1.7, and Maven version, Apache Maven 3.04. And okay, and you'll notice, okay, the Java home, that's one of the reasons, because Maven does have the dependency on the runtime. Okay, now that we have that set up, next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to start getting Eclipse set up. And so it will take a minute or two. Okay, in workspace, again, same thing. I prefer to use a separate folder. I prefer to use a SRC for my source code. Okay, so as you notice, pretty much this is a standard, if you're familiar with Visual Studio, it's pretty much a standard IDE. So first things first, the thing about Eclipse is this is kind of the kitchen sink of IDEs. It comes out with a basic, and so this is a basic setup that you then have to go and install new applications. Okay, so the first things first that we're going to want to get is we want to get Maven support set up for this. Okay, and so the very first one, so if you do go, and if you notice where I went, help, Eclipse Marketplace, and so this is kind of your, this is kind of like, you know, the one-stop shopping. If you need a plugin, this is where you want to go and search. If you need something, say you want to do other development, you do a search in wham. Okay, so let's go ahead and it goes through and it figures out, okay, this particular plugin we need to have these particular entities installed, and so it goes through and it handles all of the installation for you, and download, and it's all in one. Okay, you go through, and so I did go through a dry run with this, so some of the stuff is already on the system, but this is going to be initial install or just do an update. It's going to be the same sort of behavior where it goes through, it downloads, you go through and you do your license check and your license agreement, and then it installs the software for you. And then depending on what plugins you install, it may or may not need to restart. Okay, now if we go help, about Eclipse, Maven integration for Eclipse. Okay, now because this tutorial is also going to be using some other packages, the focus is actually going to be on getting this working with Spring. We have some other packages to install. Okay, so what I also want to go ahead and get installed right now is I want to get the Spring environment set up on this as well. Okay, and so again, first thing that comes up is Spring Tool Suite for Juno. Because we're not using Juno, we want to use actually the Spring Tool Suite for Indigo instead. And so you'll notice same thing. It goes through and it resolves what files does it need to grab. And so there's, just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to actually install all of these packages. As you'll notice, many of them are optional. So just to give you, I put this on pause for a minute, and because this was taking a little while because of the download. Okay, and so it's got the installation. Let's go ahead and restart. All right. Close that. Okay, at this point, what I decided to do is just fast forward and to bring Eclipse up. And so you'll notice we now have our Spring dashboard. We go to About Eclipse, Spring IDE, the Maven integration for Eclipse, and we should be good. And so this concludes this first tutorial.